Good morning. My name's Maurice Crespi. I'm the managing partner of Schindler's Attorneys. Schindler's Attorneys is a co-founder of COBRA. COBRA is a pro bono initiative designed to help out businesses in distress through these times of need. We do so by way of a website with an incredibly detailed knowledge base. You can find that on www.cobra.org.za. Or we set up meetings with you and your team. We can do so via Zoom or Teams. And the idea there is we can address specific issues that may be peculiar to your industry or to your business. We can meet with your staff if need be. And we also have a team of mediators to assist in mediating payment arrangements between debtors and creditors. And the idea is you come into the COBRA ecosystem, and we try and get your creditors into the COBRA ecosystem so we can assist them in dealing with their cash flow constraints. As part and parcel of this initiative, we have these webinars. We host them every day, and we have guest speakers. And the idea is we obtain insights from the speakers, which we believe will be useful in assisting businesses in their time of need. COBRA is not only about companies, we also assist sole proprietorships, spas or shops, whoever you may be. So please reach out, send us an email at info@cobra.org.za, and we'll assist, we'll immediately respond, and we'll be there for you. Today we have a very, very special guest and friend of mine, Gilan Gork. He's a mentalist. He is incredibly famous. What comes to mind in relation to one of the videos that you'll find on the Carte Blanche website involves him driving around Kyalami racetrack with a hood, not being able to see, and he did it perfectly blindfolded. So we have him today so to enable him to reveal his secret to us and let us know how he did it. But jokes aside, let me tell you a bit about him. Gilan has presented for international companies, business organizations, and government agencies in 30 countries across Europe, Africa, Asia, and America, and is the author of the best-selling book Persuasion Games, which I actually have here. I'm busy reading it. Thank you, Gilan, and you'll see you'll note the post-its. Brilliant book, incidentally. With 2 decades experience as a professional mentalist, Gilan creates unique learning experiences that help unleash their influence. He teaches how to apply a working knowledge of influence and persuasion to real life practical situations to be able to lead, sell, negotiate, market, inspire on a new level. So welcome, Gilan. Before I hand over to you and you reveal your secrets, I'd like to introduce the remaining members of the panel. We have Emma Marseille. I didn't mention it previously, but IQ Business was also a co-founder of COBRA, together with Engaged Business Turnaround. We also have Renee Klopper from IQ Business. And finally, we have Gary Barachowitz from Schindler's Attorneys. Gilan, thanks so much for joining us. This is a real treat. Over to you.
Maurice, thanks, man. It's always such a pleasure to be here with you. Obviously, we're friends outside of this as well, but yeah, just anything that we can do to get through this together in this time. And I must just commend you guys, everyone involved in COBRA, of the amazing work that you guys are doing. I recall that you guys were one of the very, very first to immediately step into action when all of this craziness started, to start offering resources and webinars like this for people who are going through distress during this time. So it's my absolute pleasure to be here. Hello to everyone who is watching. As Maurice said, I'm a mentalist. Most people have only heard of the term mentalist from the TV show. But you know, the term mentalist really is an open term. You know, some people who are great at maths can call themselves a mentalist, or memory work. I specialize and I'm passionate about the topic of influence. Maurice has mentioned one of my media appearances where I was on Carte Blanche, where they put me to the test to try and read and influence people. And you know, there's that entertaining side of it. But I travel around the world and I help from the likes of NATO and government agencies and businesses to develop their influence, whether it be leadership, sales, negotiation, all of these topics where influence is a touch point, like Maurice already mentioned. And today they've asked me to speak about something that's more around self-influence. which is what I call high performance mentality. So the format of today is I'm going to share with you some ideas, some perspectives, and hopefully leave you with a couple of mental tools and strategies that you can already start using the moment you log off of this webinar at the end of it. That'll take about half an hour or so. And then I believe that we're going to have some time for Q&A. So, of course, the team are already monitoring. If you do have any questions or anything that you want to ask, then, of course, we can collect those. And I'm happy to spend some time answering questions after that. So today we're talking about high-performance mentality. And, in fact, one of the reasons why I actually am here was because Adam Kraker from IQ Business, I had a conversation with him. He actually did my 14-day high-performance mentality program. And then moved on to some other programs of mine. And we had a conversation and he asked me to share some ideas around high performance mentality, specifically around this 14-day challenge that I have. And so, in case you're on Facebook and you quickly logged on now, but if you're not able to stay for the full webinar, let me mention this right off the bat, that if anything that I speak about here resonates with you, head on over to self-influence.com. So that's self-influence.com, and there is an absolutely free 14-day high-performance mentality challenge. We have a challenge that starts every Monday, so you would just put in your name and email address. You'll get all your login details. Like I mentioned, it's free, and every single day for 14 days, you're going to get an 11-minute high-performance mentality exercise that you go through, that I take you through. It's about 11 minutes, and then every couple of days, there's also a small video that will teach you something around high performance mentality, a mental strategy or anything like that that's going to help you to take your clarity, your focus, your levels of concentration, your ability to control your thoughts, to control your emotions in such a difficult time. And people have even said that they end off at the end of the 14 days having better memory and things like that, which is 100% possible based on the program that we have. So if there's one thing that you take out of this, obviously in a short session like this, I can bring certain things to your awareness, but actual change is when you engage in a process over time as you start to rewire your mind for the new levels of high performance mentality. So head on over to self-influence.com. Right. With that said, there's quite a lot that I want to cover today. I'm going to share some perspectives, some of them quite deep, perhaps even a little bit elusive, but once the penny drops, I'm going to try and land it for you. Hopefully it's going to give you quite a big revelation, because if you're like me, I know how you're feeling. I mean, the whole reason why COBRA was set up is because people are in distress, and it's completely understandable. We're going through a time of immense uncertainty and change. And just as we get used to one change, something else changes. We don't know where we're going to be in the very next moment. How are things going to be? Never mind where we're going to be next week or next month or even next year. So in a time of change like this, obviously there's lots of emotions that come up. We're driven by fear. We're driven by anxiety. There's this deep sense of uncertainty. And to be honest, nobody has all the answers, right? If anybody tells me that they have all the answers, that's definitely a person who I'm not going to be influenced by, right? You know what I'm talking about here, because things are changing so quickly. And on top of that, I know that, no matter where you live in the world, but obviously this is a South African audience, we know that there are also other entities or people who have their own agendas that may be impacting or influencing what's happening with you. Whether it be, and I'm not trying to be nasty here, whether it be the media. I mean, we know media, obviously they want to get ratings and views. And so often they'll use things like fear to give themselves a competitive edge against other media agencies. So we know that there's that dynamic. We know that there are some politicians that have their own agenda as well. And so there are these things that are out of our control that tend to still impact and influence what it is that we're going through here. And I know that creates a sense of uncertainty, a feeling of a kind of a loss of control. I know that many people watching this here are business owners, as am I. Or maybe you're watching this and you have a job. Maybe you're watching this and you lost your job, or you got a pay cut. Or maybe things are actually okay. Like maybe you're working in a business or you own a business that's been able to support you to keep everything afloat during this tough time. But you're also realizing that even before this crisis, we were trying to take things to the next level. Now there is this crisis. If we don't continue to grow and improve, how long can things last before obviously we have the same fate as everyone else? And I just want you to know that I completely get it. In the first week when lockdown was announced, in under a week, I lost my entire year's work of traveling all around the world. I had gigs internationally, in Zanzibar and beautiful places like that, and even, you know, Thailand and other places in Europe and Africa. And within under a week, it all got cancelled, speaking at different conferences. And of course, you know, conferences, you know, are not even happening yet. And so, you know, still being affected by this. So I completely understand if you're feeling those emotions of fear and uncertainty or anxiety, you're not sure what the next moment is going to bring. I completely get it. And I want to say to you that things will be okay. All the things that you want to achieve, if you still are a person who has big goals, even though you're not, you might be in a certain place or mindset right now, you can still achieve your goals. With the right mindset, with the right mentality, there are opportunities there. There are things that you can do right now, not only to be able to let go and release yourself of the stress and suffering that you're going through right now, but also to be able to have better clarity and focus, better problem solving, decision making. And so all of these skills that I've just mentioned can help to take you from where you are now, despite the uncertainty and despite the stress, despite not having all the answers, can take you from there to wherever it is that you want to be. And that's really what I want to try and share with you here in this session, is to give you some of those perspectives and tools for that to take place. So I want you to know that you don't have to feel all of the stress. Here's where I want to start with this conversation. Let's just start with what we can control and what we can't control. And I want to go beyond the obvious over here. Firstly, I must tell you that I learned this the hard way. You know, being a mentalist and specializing in influence and persuasion, you saw Maurice held up my best-selling book, Persuasion Games. The byline is The Mind Games of Influence and How to Win Them, right? So now you have me, the mentalist, thinking I know all about influence and persuasion. And for many, many years of my career, I felt that everything that had happened around me and for me was because I was influencing that to happen in some way. And there was something that happened that it seemed like a crisis for me at the time that reminded me of what I call micro and macro influence. So in short, the story was that I had a theater show back in 2011. The executive producer of Carte Blanche came to watch it. And after it said, we got to get you on the show. And this is where, you know, Maurice mentioned that I drove the Aston Martin around Swartcourt racetrack, completely blindfolded with a hood over, you know, like a bag over my head with Derek Watts next to me. And there were some other experiments that they had me try. And it was so successful that he said to me, look, we've got to actually create a TV show. Cut a long story short, we worked so hard. I mean, we're talking about months and months of preparation. Months then turned into years. We got outside consultants. We invested a lot of our money because we wanted to create a one-of-a-kind, international quality, you know, that we could sell all over the world, this Mentalist TV show. And what had happened was I started to pitch with the team, the production team, started to pitch these ideas to Mnet. That was the broadcaster that we wanted to work with. And they said to me, Gilan, you know, the team from the production company said, Gilan, you got to be in the pitch with us because you can probably influence people better than anyone, especially since you're the star of the show. So I would go into the pitch and I would do the presentation, and we got an amazing response. And they said, this is great. And then we would get to the next level and the next level. And all along the way, I'm thinking to myself, oh, you know, we're succeeding. We're climbing the levels because of me, because of the pitch, because of what, you know, the influence that we're creating along the way. And then eventually we just needed one more signature. Everything was basically approved. We just needed one more signature. The show was going to go into production. It would have been commissioned. And this now brought us to the end of 2016. So now we're in December 2016. I'm not sure if you remember what happened politically in South Africa in December 2016. It was when our finance minister at the time, Nhlanhla Nene, got fired by Jacob Zuma. And literally overnight, the Rand absolutely plummeted. And I remember getting a call the next day to say, listen, Gilan, you won't believe what's happened. The Rand has gone haywire against the dollar. All of the budgets are completely thrown out and Mnet can't commission the show anymore. And it was this heart-sinking moment because on one moment, like the moment before that happened, I had a TV show And then the very next moment, I had no TV show. And the thing is, I couldn't control it. I couldn't control what had happened with the Rand-dollar exchange. I couldn't control what had happened between Jacob Zuma and Tanzania. I couldn't control any of that stuff. And not only could I not control it, but how would I know how and why all of that happened in the first place? You know, how would I even know what happened in Jacob Zuma's childhood that maybe made him behave the way that he behaved, or any other politician for that matter that may have contributed to that situation? Just to give an example, right? I had zero control. Not only zero control, but I had zero knowledge of everything that went to make that moment what it was. But what had happened was, all out of my control is everything in my world suddenly changed. And this massive opportunity that was going to launch my career at the time to, you know, in a completely different way, was lost. And so what I realized is that we have micro and macro influence. The macro influence is the environment or ecosystem, all right, the world that we live in which we contribute our micro influence. Our micro influence is our actions, thoughts, and behaviors. Now, was it important that I exercised my best micro influence in those meetings where I was pitching the ideas? Absolutely, because if I couldn't, you know, give my personal micro influence to those moments, I probably never would have gotten that far. So that is still really, really important that we control our actions, thoughts, and behaviors. But we still need to be supported by the macro influence. I mean, the macro influence was that Mnet was even looking for a show locally to produce, that they liked the idea of having that mentalist theme, and that they weren't looking for like something to do with singing or something, or, you know what I mean? Whatever the case was, there were so many other factors that even helped me get to that point that I was completely unaware of. So that's what I want to share with you, is this concept of macro influence and micro influence. And if we apply that to what's happening in this current pandemic, this crisis we're going through with the coronavirus, just think about how every single moment is the result of everything that's come before it. Like this moment right now that we're having here, you're on either Facebook watching this, or on Zoom with us here watching this. This very moment is the result of everything that's come before it since the beginning of time. You know, even the fact that people discovered precious metals, that they could then land up making microchips, that they could then land up making, you know, computers, and there's the internet, you know, then of course, wherever you are in the world watching this, or wherever you are in South Africa, the fact that you are there and you are you, that's the result of everything that's come before it. Everything, each moment is a result of everything, is the sum of everything that has come before it, in terms of, you know, science, in terms of psychology. And so this very moment in front of us has got so much to it. If we think about the coronavirus, for us to have this moment right now where we're experiencing the coronavirus, there had to be somebody in Wuhan, China, who landed up eating a bat. The fact that he was hungry at the time, the fact that that bat was caught, the fact that that bat was even born, or that there were even bats in the first place, all of those things had to happen for that moment to have happened, for him to eat that bat. Then what about other things that we couldn't control? Like, how did that virus spread around the world so quickly? Well, part of that would be the fact that we have technology and air travel. Now, of course, you and I didn't invent air travel, nor do we control anything about air travel for that to have happened. And yet, the result of all of those things happening is that the coronavirus has landed in South Africa, and everything that we're experiencing is what we're experiencing. So I just want you to acknowledge at the moment that there are so many things that has made this moment in front of you, of which A, you do not control, and B, you do not know what went in to make this moment. For us to say, I know exactly how this moment should or should not be, is for us to say that we know everything that has come before this moment, since the beginning of time, to create this moment. That's the same as me giving you a book, and you open up the book and you read one word, and I take the book away from you and I say, what's the book about? There's no way for you to know what the book is about just by reading that one word or that one page even. It's the same with this moment. What you are experiencing right now, every moment that we experience, we're only privy to our experience of that moment, and we're not privy to everything else, the macro influence, which has resulted in this moment being exactly what it is. The thing is that our mind plays tricks on us. Our mind leads us to believe that we know how things should or should not be. You know, you hear people saying this virus should never be here in the first place, or things should be easier, or these people should do this, or the government should do that, or I was comfortable with the way things were, or whatever. Whenever people are expressing, or maybe you find yourself expressing how you think things should or should not be, or how you want things to be or not, that's what your mind is creating, all right? And this is what I call your artificial reality. Your mind creates a reality that you want. So in this reality, you have everything that you want, and you don't have anything that you don't want, all right? So in this reality, everything is normal, whatever that means anymore. You're comfortable, you're making good money, you're happy, all of these things. And so what happens is we live our lives where our minds are overlaying our artificial reality over real reality being the fact that each moment is the sum of everything that's come before it, of which we know pretty much nothing about, right? And so it's layering our artificial reality over our real reality. And when real reality happens, and it happens to match our expectation or match our artificial reality, we're happy, right? But when there's immense change, and things are changing so quickly, and when things aren't happening that match our artificial reality, the way that we want things to be, then we experience deep stress. We experience a sense of resistance and suffering inside of us. And that's where panic and fear and anxiety and all of these dynamics start coming into play. So you basically have a choice. In each and every moment that's in front of you, you can decide to be in tune with two different realities. You can be in tune with what real reality is, understanding and respecting as you come into each moment, that each moment is the sum of everything that's come before it. Or you can be more in tune with your artificial reality, which is how you want things to be, or how you think things should or shouldn't be, which, like I said, it's ludicrous for us to think that we could know how things should or should not be, right? So you have this choice of which one you want to be in tune with. Now, I want to give you a sporting analogy here. So pin that for just a moment. Real reality, artificial reality, right? I used to play tennis. I was the captain of the B tennis team in primary school. So I wasn't a very good player, but I still enjoy hitting a ball every once in a while. And I enjoy watching tennis on TV as well, Wimbledon and the tournaments. And you don't have to be a tennis player to get this, right? But imagine that you're playing tennis with somebody, and obviously you're going to hit the ball over to their side and they're going to hit the ball back to you. As a tennis player, do you sit there, or stand there rather, with your tennis racket saying, all right, I want that person, I want my opponent to hit the ball right over here to my right-hand side because this is where my forehand is. And my forehand, I'm really great at my forehand. And I actually want it to land right here because this is my sweet spot. If it lands here and I'm going to hit my sweet spot, then I'm sure to win the point. And eventually I'll win the game. And so you're waiting for that ball. And you hit the ball over and you're waiting for the forehand to be returned. And as your opponent hits the ball, you just lunge to where you thought the forehand was going to be. And actually, your opponent hit the ball into the other side. And you completely missed the shot. If you were playing tennis, would you suddenly start screaming and shouting and feeling anxiety and stress and saying, what did you do? Well, you were supposed to hit the ball this side. This is where I was expecting the ball to go. Why did it go that side? Now, is that how you would play tennis? Right? Surely you wouldn't play tennis that way, right? And yet, this is how we tend to be playing life, especially in a time of crisis. How many people are saying, this is not what should have happened. This is not how I wanted things to happen, right? I wanted the ball to land here. I wanted things to stay the same. This is how things should be. This is how people should respond. This is what other people should do. But that's all just part of your artificial reality. So let's go back to tennis. How do you really play tennis? Well, when you play tennis, you hit the ball over, right? Now your opponent's going to return. And you're watching that ball. And you're seeing where the ball hits your opponent's tennis racket and where it rebounds off. You're looking at the whole situation, right? You're looking at it non-judgmentally. You're just observing it. You're seeing that based on where your opponent is looking, where their body is turned, where the ball is hitting their racket, you are in the zone. So in sports, it's called being in the zone. I'm sure you've heard that before. And as you see that ball rebounding off the racket and coming to your side, you're already responding more intuitively on where that ball is going to go, and you're returning the shot. That's being in the zone. And so the same applies to where we are right now, is that you have a choice to either remain in your artificial reality, to have this illusion that your mind creates, that you know how anything should or shouldn't be, just because you're aware of something unfolding before you. Let's just, say moment by moment, because we live life moment by moment, right? So whatever moment is unfolding before you, whatever situation, you can choose to acknowledge that you actually don't know how things should or shouldn't be. They just are the way they are because everything's a result of everything that's come before it. Or you could choose to obviously be stuck in your artificial reality and experience all of that suffering because things aren't the way you want them to be. Of course, you can already see from what I'm saying, which choice will help you to respond in a more intuitive way, to get in the zone and to make the best decisions, to play the best moves to win the game, even if it's the game called life. So that's really what I want to share with you. The core message over here is that if you want to have that mental agility, to be able to be adaptable, to be able to observe what's happening around you, to be able to make better decisions that aren't clouded or driven by fear and panic and anxiety, then of course just the simple acknowledgement of the fact that we can choose which reality that we want to be more in sync with, that already will get you most of the battle won. So what stops people from staying in or accessing this state of being in the zone? I want to share that with you before we close off over here. Well, firstly, in times of crisis, there's a lot of change going on. And our brains, as much as we like to think that we like change, we always think, oh, we don't like it when things stay the same for too long. But our brains in evolutionary terms are wired to have a sense of control, have a sense of certainty to keep us alive for survival. So when things start to change, this actually poses a threat to our brain. And so our brain generally dislikes change. We have a resistance to change. Now, when things are changing out of our control, because it's all got to do with the macro influence, which we don't only control, but we don't even understand, right? So these things are happening. We feel the sense of this loss of control. Change is happening all around us. And so our mind tries to hang on to control. And so what lands up happening is distractions. And distractions come in many forms. Our mind gets distracted with little things that take us away from the main thing, the important stuff that we need to work on. Because the important things that we need to tackle in a time of crisis, in a time of deep uncertainty like this, generally to be able to work in those spaces, to solve those problems, means that we need to be open and conditioned to excel in or through uncertainty. And our minds, which in evolutionary terms just want to hang on to certainty and control. So what it does is our mind will start making us do things like procrastinate. You may not realize you're procrastinating, but you're thinking to yourself, okay, before I do that, I've got to get everything perfect. All right, maybe it's I've got to clean up my desk, or maybe it's, before I do that, I've got to make sure I've got all the right programs and I've got all the right. And so we land up getting distracted and procrastinate on all these little things that are really just keeping us in this state of feeling like we're in control because we're still deciding what to do and all of these things matter, right? But they're not that important. The next thing is we obviously get distracted with excuses. We look around and we start blaming. We get caught up in our artificial reality because our mind, has this illusion that we know how things should or shouldn't be. And if they're not that way, well, then it's not our fault. And so suddenly we get paralyzed, right? We may become complacent, especially if things are okay. We're looking around, we're just waiting to see what happens. And so we're caught up in distractions that prevent us from reaching next level of performance. And the third thing that happens is even perfectionism. Now, firstly, perfectionism can be a form of procrastination. So I'm trying to get everything perfect before I get started. But actually, that's just because I feel like I can control getting things perfect before diving into the real task, which has got a lot of uncertainty attached to it. But also in a time like this, especially if you own a business, if you're leading people, a lot of people may be looking to you for answers as well. And, you know, I just want to let you know that as a leader, you don't need to have all the answers. Like I mentioned at the beginning of this, if somebody always has the answer, they're like Mr. or Mrs. Know-it-all with everything, I actually lose that sense of influence with them. I don't trust them as much. You know, in a time where there's uncertainty, what that indicates is that there's a need for leadership, not a lack of leadership, but there's a need for leadership in a time of uncertainty. And it's okay not to have all the answers, so long as you still have direction and clarity and you can provide hope for people. I'm going to end off talking a little bit about hope at the end of this. But whether it's perfectionism or getting distracted by excuses or procrastination, all of these are our mind's attempt at still feeling like we're controlling what's happening around us. And what's scary about this is that we're completely unaware that this is happening. We're kind of stuck in a state of unaware inaction. We're basically emotional slaves to familiarity because everything else feels so uncertain, because change is happening so much. So what we want to do is to overcome this is two things. The first is to realize and acknowledge what I spent the first half talking about, which is that we never really controlled anything anyways. We control our micro influence, but our macro influence, we never controlled anyways. The fact that we're going through these uncertain times just brings to light the fact that we don't control everything. It reminds us how little we actually control. So the first thing is the moment you acknowledge that and can actually open up to that, it frees the mind to realize that we don't control everything. Things are going to change anyways. So the first thing is to acknowledge that. But then, of course, the second thing is to open up to uncertainty, because when we realize that all that we can control are our thoughts, actions, and behaviors, the actual outcome is the result of everything that's come before it. The macro influence, including our micro influence, that the macro influence either supports or doesn't. So once we open up to uncertainty, we can start to move through uncertainty. We've got to change our relationship with uncertainty. I mean, think about everything great in your life. Everything that came into your life was once an unknown. It came from the future, right? We don't know what the future holds. But there are some amazing things that the future holds for you, some amazing opportunities, even in these uncertain times. And so to be able to open up and to lean into that uncertainty, to be able to lead yourself and others through times of crisis and immense change like this, that comes from first understanding and freeing ourselves of the need to try and control absolutely everything around us. So to end off, let me just say that in a time of crisis, like what we're going through here, a pandemic, a crisis doesn't make people. You know, you hear of people who they go into a crisis or a recession or something, and their business suddenly is booming afterwards, right? And people say, oh, you know, they were made in a crisis, like that crisis shaped who they are. But in a crisis, a crisis doesn't shape us. A crisis reveals us. It puts us under pressure. It squeezes us, and whatever's inside comes out. It's like that, the saying, what happens when you squeeze an orange? Orange juice comes out. It's the same with humans. When we're put under pressure in a time of crisis, like what we're going through now, whatever's positive or negative is going to come out. And there's typically 3 different responses. This is based on a joke that I once heard. They said, the joke was that there's 3 types of people. By the way, never truer word than that said in jest, right? It's a very powerful, funny way to think of it. But there's 3 types of people. They are the people who make things happen. They're the people who watch things happen, and they're the people who look around and say, what just happened? And that's indicative of the kind of response that we're seeing from people in a time of crisis. They're the people who immediately jump into action and are making things happen. There are the people who are just going, okay, let me just see what happens. And then there are the people who are just saying, what's happening? What is your response that you've had? And listen, this is not a time for you to think to yourself, I've had a response that's undesirable, and then start shaming yourself. That's not what we're getting at over here. It's about getting in the zone, like the tennis player, where you're just observing where the ball is going so that you can react more influentially and intuitively to that. So if you pick up in yourself, okay, listen, up until now, I haven't had the best perspective on things. I haven't had the best mindset. It's affected my attitude. It's affected my ability to get in the zone. I've been more in my artificial reality. Don't shame yourself for that. That's where most people are. But just say to yourself, all right, what do I need to do now to take action? And taking action would be engaging in a process where you can start rewiring your mindset. Instead of the default human mindset of being consumed with our artificial reality and not being in the zone, you can engage in a process like my 14-day challenge that I mentioned at the beginning of this. Remember, the URL is self-influence.com, where every day you can start to rewire your mind, where your new default is remaining in the zone, calm, with clarity, where you don't have that fear and anxiety. You're able to see things as they are. You're able to get the right perspective, which improves things like not only your mood and just, your quality of life, but your decision making, your problem solving. All of that starts to improve when you have that high performance mentality. So in closing, I just want to mention here that, I believe in you, the fact that you've invested the time to even be on this call. And I have hope for us. I have hope for our country. I have hope for the world. Because hope comes from people who take action, like you on this call right now. There's a difference between hope and optimism. Optimism is the belief that things will get better. And it takes no courage to be optimistic. But hope is the belief that together we can make things better. And often it takes a great deal of courage to have hope in a time of uncertainty. But so long as we're influencing ourselves, staying in the zone with high performance mentality and able to influence others around us, to be in the zone as well, to have the right perspectives, to help them have clarity and to share that hope and be a beacon of hope, then together I really do believe that we can come out of this stronger than we could ever believe. And you can still achieve all the goals you wanted to achieve before this happened. The goal is in concrete, but your plan is in sand. So obviously, the way to get that goal will need to change. We'll need to adapt. That's what we're talking about here. But you still can achieve everything in life that you've ever wanted to. And that's my message to you today. So I hope that this made sense and that you enjoyed it. And Maurice, I'm going to call you back in case there's any questions.
Well, I've got tons of questions, as you can imagine. There is a question that I'm going to jump into, but before we get there, I just want to deal with the macro and the micro causes, because I think it's quite important. Because what I'm hearing from you is that we do not have free will, okay? And you decided to not use the term, and I think you're very, very careful in not using the term because it does. It is contentious. And what you've done is you've said, look, the macro causes is cause and effect. If every event has a preceding cause, how does one have free will? That's the philosophical proposition. If every event has a preceding cause, how is it compatible with free will? And you went into micro causes because that's where, if free will exists, it's going to be at a micro level. But on a macro level, just the fact that you exist was contingent on your mother and father meeting. That's a macro cause, and everybody can accept that. Now, there's a question here that says, you can comment on that aspect, but in answering this question, can you give people any help to take steps in accepting the fact that we cannot control the macro factors? Now, I'd go further and say, you cannot control your micro factors, but that's a separate debate. But can you jump in there?
Yes, absolutely. Very interesting comment about free will there, Maurice, and probably this is not the time or place to dive into that deep philosophical discussion. But to answer the question of, can we train our minds? Absolutely. Look, I mean, here's the thing. Since we're born, our minds, our brains have been forming synaptic connections and neural pathways. And so we tend to have this kind of default reactions to things, almost like we have programs in our brains that just kind of execute, that just fire off commands, even without us realizing it. And the analogy that I'll use here is if you've ever gone skiing and imagine a slope that's got some nice soft snow. And then let's say you're on a sled, all right? And you hop on the sled and you go down the slope. It's going to leave a bit of a groove, right? And eventually, as you go down the slope more and more, some of those grooves are going to get a little bit deeper. And eventually, some of those grooves are going to get so deep that even if you push off in a certain direction, the moment your sled hooks into one of those grooves, then it suddenly will latch into that path, and you'll go down that exact same path. And then each time you do that, it deepens the groove more and more. And eventually, we have these grooves of thought and reactions that create certain emotions in us. And those emotional reactions create even more thoughts. And so what happens is that we are preconditioned to, for example, even just being in touch with our artificial reality instead of real reality. We've been doing that our whole lives. So it's really easy to just snap into that mode and completely lose that perspective. You know, we lose that ability to be in the zone and to come into each moment with that perspective that actually, you know, it's a paradox. It's like the more you let go of control, the more control you actually have, because that illusion of control is what makes you actually not have as much control. You think you do, but you don't. So can you learn to do that? Absolutely. It doesn't happen in a one-time session like this. A session like this can give you awareness of it, but we can't ever break neural pathways in our mind, in our brain. But what we can do is we can build stronger ones. So for example, the exercises in my 14-day high-performance mentality challenge, well, you know, it begins off with just trying to train your focus and attention so that you can realize when your mind is slipping into grooves that are undesirable, whether those grooves result in certain thoughts that are unproductive or certain emotions that lead you astray. And so, you know, having that type of focused attention is a skill that you can develop. But like any skill, you got to practice. That's why with the 14-day challenge, instead of me making, you know, a webinar of it, it's basically getting you to do specific mentality training exercises that slowly but surely are building those new neural pathways. So yes, you can actually develop your mind like any skill to be able to remain in the zone more often. So I hope that answers your question. Another one, Maurice?
I think you're referring to the default mode network in one's brain. And as I understand it, the default mode network is basically you when you drive to work, you don't remember the route to work because it was pre-programmed in your brain. And the default mode network is that ski slope, and you'll carry on going down that ski slope until reprogrammed. Now, on the reprogramming, a lot of what you're saying sounds very much like the practice of mindfulness. Can you comment on that?
Mindfulness is the first step to this, of course, because, you know, look at the beginning of coronavirus. There was the one public health spokesperson overseas. We were all kind of laughing, you know, with the memes that went around where she was saying, you know, we need to be careful, not, you know, no one touch your face. And then in the very next breath, she licked her finger to turn the page, right? And so how can we control anything if we can't even control where our mind is? You know, where we get lost in thought. And so definitely being able to develop the ability to be with your thoughts and to not slip into this automatic thinking is the first step to obviously rewiring your mind for high performance mentality.
So what about what I've done, and I try and be as mindful as possible. And what I've decided to do in the Corona context, and I'll ask you to comment, is to be mindful about the fact that from an evolutionary perspective, our reaction to Corona has not evolved at all, because we've only came across germ theory about 150 years ago. Prior to that, so from an evolutionary point of view, you know, look at our reaction to a bee. We freak out, we run out, and that's a bee with a bee sting. Whereas over here, what's happening is there is no evolutionary reaction to germs. So we seem to actually be pretty okay about it. I mean, I see it in the office. People are pretty casual, and they don't seem to be that worried. What I'm putting to you is, should one not also be mindful of the fact that there are biases? We do have cognitive biases, and almost in reverse. And you should actually say to yourself, okay, wait a minute. You know, my reactions should be tailored in the context of me being mindful about certain cognitive biases.
Yeah, sure. I think that, like you mentioned, there's tons of cognitive biases. There's tons of you know, heuristics and stuff that, you know, that's going on in our minds that's making us make decisions and judgments that could be serving us or not. For example, the availability heuristic. When we hear about something, more often it gives us the intuitive feeling that is the truth, right? The more we hear about deaths in the media and the death counts, and never mind the fact that they're not necessarily saying these are the active case or not, we're just seeing these big numbers. Things are portrayed that create that fear. And so, the more you then land up hearing about, oh, so-and-so, down the street, or my friend, or the more we start hearing about people getting it, the more you're going to find people do start responding to it as if it is now a threat. But for so long as well, we heard about this, we understood the theory of it, but it was so strange to us. It's not foreign. There was nothing that we could compare it to, if that's what you're talking about in terms of in evolutionary terms, evolving to be scared of the virus. And so a lot of people have responded very differently, also depending on what information they're feeding into themselves. Because we don't know much about the virus, if you're watching this news network or this news network, you're going to have different views. If you are scrolling on people's Facebooks and you happen to have this group of friends or that group of friends, so everyone's got a very different response to it, because whatever that availability heuristic, whatever information we're getting most often to us is what gives us the intuitive feeling that that's the correct answer, whether it is or it isn't. Like, that's got nothing to do with reality, but that'll create a bias in us of what we think is or isn't the right thing to do. So I think we've got to be very careful of where we get our information. We need to understand that we have a confirmation bias. If you want to believe that this thing is just the common flu, you're going to seek other people who are saying the same thing to confirm your existing beliefs. So we do need to fight the tendency to look for what it is that we already want. That's being stuck in our artificial reality. Whereas if we can mindfully realize when that's happening, but be able to see reality for what it is, and just observe it non-judgmentally, we're in a far better position to make the right decisions. So I hope that answers that.
So it does. Thank you very much for that. You've approached this very much from an individual level. What about from a leadership level? What does one do as a leader with one's staff? And do you have any tips in that context?
Sure. Well, look, I mentioned a couple of things in the talk already, in that in times of crisis where there's so much changing so quickly, what could land up happening is it feels vulnerable as a leader to not have the answers, especially when you feel that there are people looking at you for the answers. And so a lot of people might land up, trying to act like they have all the answers, because they haven't develop the capacity to sit with the emotions of uncertainty. And so without that capacity to lean into the vulnerability of the situation, you find that people land up, pretending like they have all the answers, because that makes them also feel more in control. So as a leader, I just want to say that it's okay if you don't have all the answers. I mentioned earlier that uncertainty is not proof of a lack of leadership. Uncertainty is proof that there's a need for leadership. And in time of a crisis, like I mentioned, a crisis squeezes you, right? So if you're a good leader, this is going to show, it's going to be revealed in a time of a crisis. If you're a bad leader, it's going to be revealed even quicker. So in a time of a crisis, if you're a poor leader, then you and your team are going to sink much, much quicker than normal. If you're a good leader in a time of a crisis, it's not to say that the opposite will happen and you'll shoot up. You might just be holding things together, right? But a crisis like this certainly reveals what's inside of us. And so as leaders, what we need to be is a beacon or a broker of hope and direction and clarity. A leader might say, look, I don't have all the answers, but this is the direction I think that we should move in. And when, as a leader, you're able to provide clarity to people, when you're able to provide direction and hope, then it helps people to prioritize what they should be doing. It helps them to prioritize even their perspectives. as a leader, firstly, as a leader, in a time of crisis or not, we should be putting people first. I mean, that's number one. Even if we're not in a time of crisis, we should be putting people first, because that's what leadership is. But in a time like this, in coronavirus, the context of that would be people's safety, whatever that means in terms of health or in terms of financially. We got to protect our people. So once we put people first, we need to be able to provide the right perspective. Leaders are really good at in times of uncertainty where everybody is confused. There's so much change happening. How are you able to provide perspective about it? Things like the coronavirus, there's so many things that we can think of just to give us a little bit of perspective. The fact that we've gone through far more uncertain times. I mean, the fact that we even know what causes the virus. I mean, just think back to, for example, with AIDS. It took a couple of years for scientists to even find out what the virus was that caused AIDS. Meanwhile, here with the coronavirus, in December, there was reports from the World Health Organization that there was this virus in China. And in January, we already knew what caused it. They already prototyped vaccines. We already know that it can be eliminated. There's so many good things that we already know that, so quickly tests managed to come out. Think about the SARS virus. Like, it took over a year before people even had information on it. We've got so much information on this. So, as a leader, I think that it's our responsibility to be able to provide a little bit of perspective for people. We've been in far more uncertain times. We've been through recessions before. This is not new. Crises will happen all the time. It's just because we're going through this one right now that we feel that it's particularly bad. So as a leader, to be able to provide that perspective, you can't be moaning with your people and be leading them at the same time. Like, if you're going to be the leader and to be able to provide perspective, to be able to provide clarity, to help people prioritize, to give direction to people and to give hope. And remember, like I mentioned, hope really is an active virtue. It's not just optimism that the future will be better. It's to say, together we can make it better. And so as a leader, it's the ability to be in the crowd with your people, but not to be of the crowd. You want to have your head above the crowd as a beacon of clarity and hope and perspective. So I've really tried to make what should probably be an entire talk into just an answer to that one question. And I hope I've maybe helped with a couple of things there.
No, you have, but I'm just curious as to why you didn't omit a fundamental suggestion, and that is to have the leaders compel their staff to do the 14-day challenge. What about that?
Well, I wanted you to say that because it's far more powerful coming from a third party. So thanks for suggesting that, Maurice. And I 100% agree. There should not be anyone out there who doesn't do the 14-day challenge.
Absolutely. We have another question here. Do you have any advice or insights to share on how people can protect themselves or their reactions from the media barrage? Fully removing oneself is quite difficult. Attendees, removing oneself is quite difficult. And that's exactly, I think, the point is that removing oneself is the challenge, not so?
Elaborate what you mean by removing oneself is the challenge.
You cognitively got to remove yourself from the in-fact event. So you've got to be mindful. And I think what you're saying is what's important is to be mindful of your reaction. So if there's a negative reaction, be mindful of it so you can appreciate and deal with the reaction. And, in the context of removing oneself, I think it's removing oneself mentally. That's my understanding of mindfulness, is that it's taking that step back. Often the analogy is used is that life can be, one can find oneself in a raging rapid, or through mindfulness remove oneself, but still view and appreciate that the raging rapid's there, but remove oneself from it cognitively, mentally.
Mm-hmm. I love the analogy of the raging rapid. I have a similar, I use a similar analogy, which I'm sure I heard on a podcast somewhere, I can't remember, but I call it the river of emotion. I'm sure it's the same analogy that you're referring to. And so often we get swept down that river of emotion. We hear the news, we see the numbers, it's everywhere. People, just scroll on Facebook and you can get caught up in threads of just everybody just pouring that negativity and everything into that medium. And we take that all in, and it creates this river of emotion that we get sucked down this torrent of emotion, as opposed to having the mental ability and the emotional strategies to be able to get out that river and to observe the river of emotions flowing past. Because it's those emotions that then obviously start to obscure how we feel about things. It can start to guide our beliefs about things, and ultimately our actions and behaviors. Our micro influence gets impacted by that. So it's the ability to notice the arising of those emotions, those thoughts, and to be able to observe them, and to, if need be, put them aside and rather direct your spotlight of attention onto something else that's going to actually help you to get from where you are to where you want to be. And as a leader, obviously, John Maxwell says, how we view things is how we do things. I'm not sure if that's original to him, but I heard him say that once. So as a leader, or as a person, how we view things is how we do things. But as a leader, we have an extra responsibility, because how we view things also impacts how our people view and do things. And so obviously we need to be able to develop that skill. Obviously get your information from reliable sources. That's the first thing. The second thing is obviously develop the self-awareness and that mentality to be able to pull yourself out of that those raging rapids, as Maurice has said.
One cannot reinforce more, I certainly can't, the importance of courses such as the 14-day challenge, or the mindfulness. And I was saying, just type into Google the question of mindfulness and begin the journey. I've been doing it for about 4 years now, and I couldn't recommend it more. So Gilan, thanks so much. Where can one find the 14-day challenge and further details? On your website?
They can go to self-influence.com, and it'll explain everything there. And it starts every Monday. It's absolutely free. It's we've had now over 10,000 people complete the challenge just in the last couple months. And the comments that we've got a collection of hundreds of comments of people saying how just in those 14 days they were so surprised at how much they were able to change their clarity, focus, their ability to stop procrastinating, to start making a difference in their lives, and of course their mood as well, because you start to actually you experience a great sense of freedom of mind when you actually start to conquer this. So self-influence.com.
Yeah, just to conclude, we have a comment here from my partner at Schindler's, and he's just written, I just completed your 14-day HPM challenge and wanted to let you know that I really enjoyed it and resonated with everything we did in the challenge. I've highly recommended it to peers, family, and friends. I've also signed up for your 6-week HPM immersion course starting on 2 August. I look forward to seeing what exciting things it'll bring. Tell us about that course.
Brilliant. So, we first launched the 14-day challenge, and our mission was our mission is actually to help 1 million people complete it by the end of 2023, because we feel we can make a huge difference in South Africa if we change enough people's mentality to a high-performance mentality. And we had so many people at the end of it saying, like, what do we do now? We've got this, we've done 14 days, we want more, and we know that there's obviously different layers and levels. So I took one of my corporate masterclasses and expanded it into a 6-week program or 42-day program. And that's, unfortunately, we can't offer for free. But for people who get to the end of the 14-day challenge, we do offer for them to go onto that 6-week program. That's called the HighPerformance Mentality Immersion. And that's quite an advanced program to help take your high-performance mentality to the next level.
Brilliant. Fantastic. Thanks so much, Gilan. Thanks so much to the audience and to the attendees. If you want to know more about COBRA, please go onto our website, www.cobra.org.za. And please just reach out. If you need any assistance whatsoever, reach out and we'll make a plan. We now have over 60 partners in COBRA in a whole range of disciplines, and they've all committed to help in whichever way they can. So thanks so much. Until tomorrow, bye-bye.
Ciao.